Okay, welcome to this month's RLW, Read, Listen, Watch. This is Roofers Coffee Shop's webinar, podcast, and articles that help you learn some great stuff for your business, for the industry overall. And today we are so proud to welcome Jeff Moore with Soprema on why sustainable solutions matter. So before we get to the introductions of Jeff, my name is Heidi Ellsworth, and I'm the president of Roofers Coffee Shop, and we just have a few little housekeeping items. One, this is being recorded, and as it's being recorded, we're going to be able to turn that to an on-demand platform that will be available within the next 24 hours, where you'll be able to listen to it on your podcast channels, watch it on the video, or read transcripts and future articles about this great topic. We will be taking questions at the end. So please save your questions or just put them in the chat as we go along, and I'll be able to pull those up at the end. Love any chats or any comments as we go along also. And finally, we are going to be, as I said, having, we do have everyone muted, so please use that chat so that we can make sure to catch all of your comments and thoughts. So let's get started. As I said, we're going to be talking about why sustainable solutions matter. And this is sponsored by Soprema. Talk about a company that is walking the talk, that is doing so much on sustainable. And today they're going to be sharing on why that's important to your business and to even more so your customers. And helping us today is Jeff Moore, the Sustainability Manager with Soprema. Jeff, welcome to this RLW.
Well, thank you, Heidi. I appreciate the opportunity here to speak and look forward to the conversation.
We are so excited to have you. Before we get started, could you maybe introduce yourself a little bit, tell everybody about you and Soprema?
Certainly. So I am, 30 some years in the construction industry and in many facets. And with Soprema here now, just a little over a year to help guide and direct Soprema here in the U.S. on the sustainability side. And so sustainability is an important component to Soprema globally. It's driven from the top down. And so excited to share some of that detail, and hopefully I don't normally speak with contractors, but hopefully I can share some nuggets and provide some value in understanding some of the trends.
Yeah, I think that's what's so important, Jeff, is those trends, and that all of our audience out there, our contractors, understand what architects are looking for, what building owners are looking for, what is really this trend of sustainability that's not going away. So everyone needs to be aware of it. So let's talk a little bit about that. As you're looking at sustainable solutions, maybe talk to us, like, where does that all start? How do you what are the architects, the building owners, the engineers out there, what are they looking for sustainable solutions?
So perhaps maybe to respond there, looking back, so sustainability has been around the built environment for 20 plus years, right? And we all know sustainability in terms of energy efficiencies and recycled content, etc. But what has happened here in the last couple, 3-4 years is dramatic in terms of the shift towards this carbon emissions consideration in this environment. And I think as the audience probably knows that the built environment represents upwards of 39% of CO2 emissions. And so it's here. It is the trend is now incorporating that dynamic into the design standards, and hopefully through this conversation, the contractors can better understand how they can understand the terminology of what's happening and how to respond to it.
Right. And so much of that starts with sustainable manufacturing, right?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, it really comes back to manufacturing. And so as a manufacturer, most companies have been looking at, okay, how can I incorporate renewable, recycled content? How can I optimize the manufacturing process? And so though today, and especially with Soprema for quite a few years, is it has been driven from the top down, as I mentioned earlier. But it's it's been the culture that so Soprema has been doing this because it's the right thing to lower carbon emissions, where perhaps others may be doing it because they're trying to stay inside that bandwidth of doing business, right, and maintaining a position. It's really incredible when you look inside Soprema and how it has developed this. Our owner, right? We're a privately held company, global company, and how sustainability has become part of the culture, and that includes considering, from well, we have three pillars, right? People first, right, and then the circular economy, or what we call environmental protection, and then lastly is sustainable solutions, or building the future. And it is driven top down, as I mentioned, and it's where we are today is what are we doing now as a company, as a manufacturer, to lower those carbon emissions, and so we can dive into that.
Yeah, exactly. And I do want to just comment, I like you, I've been in the industry for a long time. I have seen the LEED buildings. We've seen this drive. I love your living building challenge and sustainable buildings. So really, for some of the folks out there, they may be like, yeah, we've been hearing about this for years, but it really is taken on. This is happening, and we are seeing it through documentation, which we're going to talk about now. So there's a lot happening around this. The value, really looking at the value, and that's kind of what I'm getting to, is that it's not just the industry that's changed, it's just not the builders, it's really the consumers. So maybe talk a little bit about the value of sustainable solutions to customers.
Exactly, Heidi, and yes. It's being driven by the consumer, who is wanting a more healthier environment, right? Selecting products and such that are better for the environment. But on top of that, there is a push from the regulatory side with the municipalities and ordinances, and we can talk about that. But but it is being driven from both sides, which is healthy, right? And it's driving the building owners now to look at and desire buildings that can meet that demand, right? So in turn, right? So they're asking the architects and the specifiers to do that with their projects. And so that's where we mentioned in the present, building owners requiring it. So that's the evolution. That's where we're at today. And architects, I will say, I communicate quite a bit with them, and they're still playing catch up to this whole concept. Meaning, it's happened so fast, this transition, that a lot of their team members aren't fully on board with it, and more often they're outsourcing that to maybe a third party to help them. And so it's a work in progress, but clearly I'm seeing more and more projects, and we can talk further about what's happening on the regulatory side. But the last point there is contractors need to meet these demands or these needs, and considering, okay, the contractor is not necessarily held accountable. The contractor's bidding projects and executing and performing generally the way that the design is, but they need to understand that this is becoming more and more important. And I do know there is a voluntary kind of what do they call it? Building Green, a contractors association, where there's voluntary efforts to become more sustainable on construction sites, which can include health and welfare of the employees on the site, water conservation, waste conservation, other things that they can do now to help become more sustainable in their operations.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that there are so many ways to do sustainable roofs, right? And that the contractors need to think about all those different ways, if it's maintenance, but if it's also these specifications that are coming out from architects, building owners, roof consultants. That's really to be ahead of that step, to really understand what's going on with sustainable solutions. Now your company becomes a favorite of those architects and those building owners because they know you understand the process and embracing it.
So that's a good point. That's a good point, Heidi. And maybe to echo, so as a manufacturer, we're working like many of our competitors to position our products to be, optimum performance and best value, right? And now hopefully more sustainable, lower carbon emissions. And because of that, the architect, maybe has a certain design to accommodate that. And it's important for the contractor to recognize why it is that they're designing in the way they are, so that perhaps they're not going in and making adjustments that aren't aligned with what the intent for that design was.
Right. Yeah. Because we all know in the past, contractors have been asked, can you value engineer? Can you do something different? Can you change the spec? And there's just a lot of reasons, and we're going to get into that. So we'll get going, but there's a lot of reasons why with this new environmental product data and everything that's going on, that you can't do that all the time. So you need to be aware of what's happening. And speaking of that, with the eco-source materials, let's kind of talk a little bit about some of these products that are being sourced for the environment.
Yeah, so that's fairly basic here in terms of what are the options when we use this term eco-sourced, and clearly obvious is recycled content, and more manufacturers, especially Soprema, all the time in our research and development are sourcing and looking at ways, not just recycled, moving away from virgin, but how much more recycled can be factored in. Bio-based, that's another emerging. I shouldn't say emerging. It's been around a bit, but how do we continue to build on using bio-based or plant material type components in our products? And then lastly, as I mentioned earlier, lower carbon emissions. That seems to be a significant driver, and it's only going to continue, right? I mean, right now I see it more on the coast, the West Coast and the East Coast. But now starting to see more projects coming in the Midwest and down in Florida, especially. But those are really the three that I would say are prominent in terms of eco-source materials.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that lower carbon emissions and really becoming carbon neutral as a roofing system is only going to grow. I think that's going to be actually demanded in time, because every single part we have to be working at, and maybe even, I know we're going to talk about this a little bit, but even things that help actually reduce carbon by reducing the smog, doing the right things. So there's a lot of opportunities out there for the roofs to really make a difference in our environment. And I think that kind of really comes down to this ability to incorporate sustainable solutions into your business. So as we were talking about with the contractors out there, really kind of bringing this in, and we've had other RLWs on this in the past, Jeff, where we talk about it's not just providing what your customers need or working with your manufacturing stuff, but it's also maybe even looking a little bit at what you're doing inside your company just to kind of live that whole culture. So maybe talk to us a little bit about how some of the goals, how to kind of start incorporating this.
So, that first bullet, the sustainability goals per project, and the idea there, and that's a question that I ask our sales team right up front as they engage on a project early on, is ask that question. It helps frame what that solution is and how we respond. Of course, it's going to require documentation. I know we'll get into some of what that documentation looks like. And so, it's not for the sales team and for contractors, it's not something you typically are thinking right out of the gate on. So trying to push on that and cultivate that habit. But I put it here as well for contractors, because I think it's important for them. Of course, the general contractor's probably going to be managing that piece, but it's important that these contractors recognize what are the goals,
Mhm.
and be able to support it as they can from their perspective.
Yeah, it seems to me that if this just becomes part of everyday business, where when you are quoting jobs, whether it's new construction or re-roof, and you are asking the general contractor or the building owner or the roof consultant, whoever it may be, like, do you have sustainability goals? What are those goals for this project? It really puts your company ahead of other people and prepares you if there are.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
That next one, their life cycle. I know we've got some additional slides there, but that term, and the term embodied carbon are becoming more and more often used, right? The counter to that is the operational carbon. So, in terms of how the terminology that's being used, operational carbon is what most of us, already understand. Like I mentioned earlier, it's how to make the building more efficient. Well, embodied carbon is really everything else. I know we'll talk further about that. And life cycle is about evaluating what that impact is, right, over the life cycle.
And then being able to take that, and also I think as the contractors are looking at this, because as we're going to get in, you're going to have to understand all these things, the life cycle, the product, but sourcing sustainable products and really understanding is a big part of it also, right?
Yeah, and that just really, I think, plays into some of the earlier comments that so contractors go to bid on a project and recognize, what the sustainable goals are, and correspondingly now are better aligned. Okay, what products are going to be best for this? I mean, you could back up and say, there's a whole lot of products that meet the same purpose. One might be coming from California one might be coming from wherever these products are manufactured, and they're coming. That all gets factored in, with this life cycle analysis. And so in the end, these products, if the performance is the same, their carbon emissions will be different. And
Right.
so we'll touch briefly on this, but architects now are getting to a place to where they can evaluate these EPDs and HPDs to better align. And it's all about transparency. We've mentioned documentation down below. So it becomes really all about transparency and which products suit the sustainability goals better.
Right. And that's going to mean training your teams to understand this documentation, to understand what questions to ask up front to find out the goals, and to understand life cycle analysis. So let's do a little bit on that, Jeff.
One thing I'll
Yes.
add, Heidi, is, in terms of training, there's just all the time there's presentations on sustainability. It seems to be the hot topic, and so clearly there's opportunities for people to plug in at like this, right? To learn.
It's really good. And I think these are what we're going over today are some really important things that if you see these, as we have further classes on this, these are the things that you're going to be asked to do. So Jeff, why don't you talk about the life cycle analysis?
So this depiction, which comes from the Living Building Challenge group, I think does a pretty good job of showing what life cycle means. And so you can use the term cradle to gate, which means up at the top is, considering emissions from your material extraction, the feedstocks to make the products. And then, right, and then as you move on around, then you have the transportation to your manufacturing and production, and then from there it gets transported to say perhaps a warehouse, a distributor, and then onto a construction site, and that's the gate, right? And that is the minimum that you would want in terms of life cycle. Ideally, that life cycle analysis is more complete, and that is considering the use of the product in the building, and maintenance, as well as end of life, right? Demolition and then disposal. So the other term there is, cradle to cradle, and that's where eventually that's where we want to be. We want to get to a place to where that material can be reused or recycled in some manner and diverted from landfill. So that's the life cycle analysis kind of framework. And in that first bullet there, talks about regulating lower carbon emissions and designing buildings to lower emissions. And I just want to give a reference here as to what is happening out there. So for example, the city of Boston now has an ordinance where buildings that are over 35,000 square feet now by 2025 will be required to be under a certain emission level as a building, right? Imagine that, right? We're not talking about just products, we're talking about the actual building itself and the carbon emissions related to that building. And so, the city the size of Boston, and it's happening in California, it's happening in many places, that there's already a push that could become ordinance, and regulations are going to play into this as well. But that just gives you a sense of, wow, that's the driver, right? That's pretty significant. So designing buildings to lower emissions, that's the goal.
Yeah.
And as manufacturers, that's where we need to be successful, is offering products that are going to support that.
Well, when you think about how important the roof is, and I love looking at this life cycle analysis, because as you're, yes, you have the construction, whatever that is, but then you have the use and also the maintenance and the maintenance of it. This is exactly where roofing contractors fit in, right? Putting on the right products, helping that, maintaining it, keeping it so it lasts as long as possible, so it doesn't have to go, it takes a long time before it has to be demolished or go back with disposal. And so I think that as contractors are looking at this and talking to this, they can see where they fit in and how important they are to that buildings, to being able to lower the emissions and its long-term durability.
Yes, exactly. In fact, there's some slides on down further that can speak more to that. But leading up, I think where we need to draw some explanation is what some of this documentation looks like, and it's all about transparency, right? Because the architects and specifiers, they don't know what's in these products, and so it's incumbent for us to provide this documentation in such a way, and that it's the EPDs and the HPDs and others that spell that out. So
right. And so let's talk about that, because this is going to be something that is going to be, this is not the first time I've been hearing about this, Jeff. We're hearing that this is going to be something that whether it's roofing contractors or the architects or a combination are going to have to be providing this documentation. So let's talk through it. You just talked about transparency, and then let's tell everybody what the heck is an EPD and an HPD.
So that image on the left is just a excerpt of one of ours to highlight. But when you look at environmental product declaration, it is a document that takes upwards of a year or to a year and a half to complete, and it can be $25,000 to $35,000. So it's a substantial undertaking, and you can imagine, because they're evaluating, analyzing every side of it, right, all the way up to where these raw materials are coming from, and evaluating all of those carbon emissions, and producing this document or EPD. which can then be used, right? And as we mentioned earlier, it's these certification programs, LEED and other, they're demanding a minimum of 20 of these documents, right? So, and it'll probably go up from there in subsequent versions. But so it's an exhaustive process to look at that particular product. This one happens to be insulation, XPS insulation. But down along the bottom there, it's a bit hard to read, but it breaks down each of those segments of that life cycle. So A1 through A3, is feedstock, raw materials, right? Production of raw materials and transport of raw materials and insulation, manufacturing. The next category, it goes on to transportation and installation and on and on. And so when you look at an EPD, then you should be able to say, okay, this one is complete all the way to end of life, or maybe it's only showing to the project or to the gate, right? But these are becoming more and more important, and for the contractor, they're the conduit. They're going to want to select products that have EPDs and can provide that to the general contractor and to the architect.
Now, what's the difference between an EPD and a health product declaration or an HPD?
Yeah, so an HPD is specific to the chemical nature of the product, right? And it is generally these are produced through a platform called HPDC, or it's the collaborative, HPD collaborative. It's a platform where manufacturers can go and use that it standardizes HPDs, and so that they're more easily read and understood. But it's simply documenting what chemicals were used in that product. So there's transparency in terms of the chemical nature of it.
I think so, and this is going to probably seem very simple, but this is not documentation that the roofing contractors have to come up with, but what they have to find, right? So this is coming from manufacturers, whether it's an EPD or an HPD, and the contractors are going to be asked, possibly by a general contractor or an architect, maybe not an architect because they're already hopefully working with the manufacturers, but they're going to be asked to supply these documentation from their manufacturers for every product.
Yeah, so maybe to draw some clarity there. So I'm speaking simply on the commercial or low slope segment. I don't pay attention to the residential, and there perhaps there's movement over there as well. I know probably in California there is, but this is really focused on new construction. So any kind of re-roof projects, you're not going to really see these, at least to my knowledge, because the building's already there, and it's just they're not trying to obtain certain carbon emissions goals, right? They're simply trying to reduce or replace the roof. So it's the contractor could facilitate this documentation. Oftentimes I find the architect contacting us directly. So it really is a matter of how that gets expedited, project by project.
Okay. Jeff, do you see going into the future the potential of, with roof consultants or architects who are working on restoration of roofs, how important the roof is to that carbon base? Do you see that possibly this could start coming into the re-roof market?
I would say eventually, so roofing is an important piece, but not nearly as big as the concrete and the steel and all those components have significantly higher environmental impacts, and that's right now that's where the big push is trying to reduce the carbon footprint on those products. But roofing, of course, is an important piece. And does it move to residential and re-roof? I think eventually it does. I don't know how quickly that is, but I would say probably.
Yeah, it seems like it always kind of follows. So working with your manufacturers to really understand it. Today, it may just be new construction, but this is going to be something, these patterns that we're going to see. We've seen that before. It starts one place and it moves into other ones as we continue to try to go down this path. So one of the things that I think is really, important is to really understand what your manufacturers are offering in the products, even beforehand. This could be used in sales to building owners. Like, do you know these products, even in a re-roof situation? So let's talk a little bit. I mean, here's a perfect example of asking about a product. This is your insulation. Talk a little bit about what this is doing and how using these kind of products with your building owners can kind of impress them that you know what's going on with environmental products.
Yeah. So in fact, these next 3 slides really are just, highlights of some ways commercial roofing is being improved, with sustainability. And so, XPS insulation is a commodity, right? It's used everywhere. But that being said, the reason I put this in here is, we now manufacture this XPS using the HFO blowing agent, which is being regulated, but only now in a few states. We decided to completely convert and begin using this product, but essentially HFC was the previous blowing agent, and it had like 1,400 times the global warming potential. It was a significant adverse environmental effect, right? Creating greenhouse gases.
Wow.
And this HFO now it drops it down below 1, so it's a significant contribution in terms of protecting the environment. And then on top of that, it's recycled up to 70%, depending on the width and the SKU. It's up to 70% of recycled content. So that is an ideal solution, right? That means something. And I'm sure others will play catch up here, but this is a great example of what I'm talking about when we identify sustainable solutions.
Mm-hmm. So it's really kind of covering all the bases. Not only is it helping to insulate the building, which is important, but it's made of recycled content, and the blowing agents, what you're using is not putting carbon emissions out.
Yeah, it's not affecting the environment like so many others are.
Yeah. That's great. Well, let's talk about some other solutions that way. Again, this is all about asking your manufacturers to really, what do they have? How are they doing it? So let's talk about a little bit about the sustainability of modified bitumen, because there's been a lot in the industry of like, oh, that's an oil product. It's not, not environmental, but really that's being proved different.
Yeah, so I put this in here because, so modified bitumen, both SBS and APP, this technology has been around for 50 years. It's proven out now and documented in terms of performance. We have roofs that are 30 plus years with no problems. The technology today is very different than the technology 50 years ago. So it's evolved, and it is this multiply durability, in our opinion. And I think you had some other leading manufacturer, I think, do a segment recently, but durability is sustainable, right? You're reducing the waste. It's not going to landfill, all the carbon emissions related to that. And so a product that lasts 30 plus years. In fact, there's an EPD that came out of the European Waterproofing Association that documented that with modified bitumen, you can recover the roof upwards of 2 times. Now, code might change here in the U.S., and how many times you can do that. But in reality, that technically you could get 90 to 105 years out of that roof just by recovering it. And we find that to be, a sustainable solution. And plus, 200 plus mils versus 60 mils of single ply is a big difference.
Yeah.
There's some new installation technologies that we will talk about. I also want to mention that with this product, we have incorporated the white granules, the bright white granules for cool roof, and that's really taken off in the last 3 or 4 years, as well as this Eco 3 smog reducing granule, which is a cap sheet, right? And it's reducing smog around these cities. And to the extent, let's just say a 20,000 square foot roof, 200 square roof, that equates to 130. It equates to the performance of having 130 mature trees on the property, right?
Wow.
And so, we have a lot of work there to push on that and educate people on that product. But it's getting traction. So that's another example of I think why we find modified to be the product of choice.
Yeah. And just talk just a little bit more about the fact that SBS is low carbon emissions. I'm sure some people are kind of like, really? SBS has low carbon emissions? What is that?
Yeah. So, you might think, you might hear old technology. It comes from the petrochemical industry, da, da, da. Well, the reality of it is, it comes, from the bottom of the barrel, right? It is the waste product coming from the oil industry. And when you run the life cycle analysis on modified, it averages out like at 1.1 kilogram CO2 equivalent for that product. And then, pick a single ply PVC, that is a product made from chemicals. And so as our other single plies, and those can average 5.5 kilograms CO2 equivalent. So actually the carbon emissions or carbon footprint is quite low compared to these other single plies. And so, I just draw that out as a comparison. We'll see as we go forward, as this continues to develop with the carbon emissions and such.
Yeah. And it's changing every day, isn't it? Oh. It's constantly changing.
It is a moving target. Yes.
Yeah.
It is a moving target. Yes.
That is so, I think part of sustainability also is how are we optimizing our workforce? And so you've already talked a little bit about the smog reducing membranes. So I'd love you to go more into that, because that I just think is so cool. But also, how are, on the job, how are we saving fuel, labor costs, just that part of sustainability?
I read recently an EPA report where there's 50 major cities in the U.S. that are severely exceeding the standard, the national federal standard for air quality, right? So there is a significant need for clean air, and much of the focus has been on emissions from vehicles, right? Where it's being generated. But we feel that, putting this on a roof, whether it's a conditioned roof or a non-conditioned roof, this is a great solution, and it doesn't tire, it doesn't get worn out. It continually is replenishing, such that it serves indefinitely in terms of reducing that, the performance reducing smog. So
well, and isn't that also, when I think about what we were talking about earlier with the life cycle and, transportation, sustainment being manufactured, all of that, but then to actually have a product on the roof that is actively reducing smog, actively cleaning the air and helping I mean, that overall is going to help
What
with carbon,
what
right?
what a sustainable message that is, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
in fact, so many are looking for ways that companies that can tout that, since that they're doing the right thing. And so, for contractors, ideally, you might make a reference to this on projects. If it's got a modified spec, well, let's let's talk, right?
Yeah.
Let's look at that option, and let's push on that.
It could change, that could be the game changer between who wins the bid of having something like that, that really, especially when you're talking about apartment buildings or any tenants and stuff, this next generation, all of our generations, but definitely the next generation cares so much about sustainability. What a great message to your tenants to say, look what we did on the roof.
Exactly. I mean, there's green roofs. We offer the green roof components. And there's other things that are available too, but that one is pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool. So talk a little bit about labor savings and using basic, we're always talking about technologies on the roof. This is some new technology that's been out there, but that is
Yeah.
really reducing labor and fuel costs. Talk a little bit about the Macadam.
Yeah. So there's a picture of it on the left, and we call it the mini Macadin, and it's been in service, with Soprema, I think at least 10, maybe 15 years. And the idea here is how can we help our contractors with installation? How can we support them in lowering labor costs, etc.? And this device automates the installation of these membranes, right? These rolled goods, and it actually reduces the propane fuel usage by 75% on a project.
Wow.
And it reduces labor. So a crew of 4 is getting 50% more done than a crew of 8, right? It's substantial. And the challenge we have, Suprema is gotten so popular, it's hard to keep up, right? And so I know our team is looking at options and how do we, I think there's talk now of renting this equipment instead of ownership and other things, and that's all in the works. But certainly, you contractors out there, if you are interested and want to talk further about that, you can reach out to me and put you in contact with the right people.
Well, with everything that's going on with material shortages, with increase in fuel costs, with labor shortages, this just really kind of hits the bill all the way around. And I know a number of large commercial roofing contractors who have mini Macadams on the roof, and it's pretty amazing what it does for the labor.
You hit the nail on the head. Labor is probably the biggest challenge with contractors, and this is significant. So absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, so cool. I love this stuff. I think it's just excellent. Everything you have, all the different solutions, we really have been across the board, but we have some questions. So I would love to get to our questions so that, because I think for all of you out there, if you have questions about the EPDs, the HPDs, your role, new ideas, please put them in the chat or the Q&A. But I'm going to bring up our first question, which is from Jason Finney. Thank you, Jason, so much. Full replacement of existing roofs is great for business, but replacing roofs puts insulation and roofing materials in landfills and requires truckloads of new material. What is the trend toward emphasizing maintenance and care to extend the life of the roof beyond the warranty duration?
Clearly, that's the direction you should go. Is and aside from putting a new roof on top of existing roof, yes, there's quite a few liquid products now that are available to extend the life of that roof. Absolutely, that is, yes, that should be the number one option to consider, right?
Yeah, and we are seeing that so much with all of our comments, Jason, that are coming into Rivers Coffee Shop. There's a lot going on, that just that big focus on maintenance and keeping it on the roof, whether that how you're doing it with service and care for extended life. And then really looking at, okay, when the warranty's done, what are some other options? What can happen? And working with your manufacturers is key.
I think that becomes more important as we move into this next economy, with
Yeah.
how things are going, and owners probably not willing to spend a lot of money, right?
So even putting down roofs that are going to can be maintained a long time. It goes back to what you were talking about durability, that
Correct.
really is that is very important to the overall life cycle analysis. And from that chart that we showed earlier, that goes right to Jason's point.
Yeah.
So, one of the other questions that we had was, really kind of going back to on the EPDs and the HPDs. How much do you see? I mean, should contractors be asking, especially contractors who are doing new construction, should this be part of their project documentation? Should they just, even if no one's asking for it, is it something important that they should have on hand?
Well, I think, depending on the scale of the project, and it shows initiative, right? It shows you're engaged, you know what you're talking about, and it can only do good by asking that question. And I think that's, in the end, that's the purpose of this presentation, is orient these contractors so they're asking the question, and then they can be part of that solution, right? They can be engaging and working with the manufacturer and helping to facilitate, this documentation.
Right. Okay, and that kind of leads to, I had another question come up over here from before, was your experience, Jeff, is very much with architects. You work with architects every single day. What is some of your advice to contractors when we're like building relationships with these architects and working with them, especially if they're interested, obviously, in the new construction? I know there's a lot of times there's a big gap between the contractor and the architect, because you have the general contractor, the roof consultant, and other people in the middle. But how can they build that relationship to help build their business?
Well, that's a good question. I will say, I know one prominent national firm has built in part of their KPIs with the team, the specifiers in the team, is to get out on projects that they have designed and see and meet with contractors and actually get feedback on how that execution is going, and helping them to do better on their design. That in of itself, I think, is significant.
Really?
The challenge is everybody is wanting the architect's time, and the roofing contractor is on down the chain a bit, and perhaps there's involvement with the manufacturer too, who might have relationships with those architects and can help facilitate some of that dialogue. But I just think it's important that these architects, they're coming up through the ranks, and how often are they actually getting out? And I mean, they're responsible for so many components on these projects. How often are they actually getting out to see and understand what it is, the materials that they're using and designing? I suppose that's about what I could offer in that question.
Yeah. I like the thing, get with your manufacturer, because I think your manufacturer reps or sales people have those relationships both with architects and with contractors. And if there is an opportunity for both to connect and walk job sites and be more knowledgeable, that's really a win, a three-way win.
Yeah. And my frame of reference here was really the specified projects. There's a whole lot of projects that others are managing, turnkey, and that's another segment of the business. So
right.
Yeah.
One last thing that I had for you too is just to kind of bring us back around with what Soprema is offering when it comes to not only can contractors come to you, obviously to get any EPDs or HPDs on all the products, but what are you seeing as the future of sustainable products? What, I mean, obviously you showed insulation, so some more, but anything that you can give just a little bit of a highlight that might be coming in the future, some of the areas that are going to be really important.
Some of the you talking about the products?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, I wrote a note here. I wanted to mention it and I failed to. So
Good.
if I could jump in on this particular one. But earlier we mentioned value engineering,
Oh yeah.
which happens so often on projects, and you know the term in of itself is a good term. It should be that it's value engineered so that a product is of equal or greater uh, 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 to the basis of design, right? And it's not that it's off, you know, that it's value engineered to a cheaper product, less or inferior product. And so that I just want to draw some clarity to that, because we find that, you know, that happens, right? It happens. And I wrote this down because I read it. Roofs are about 2%. If you consider the walls and waterproofing, it could be 3% of construction costs for a project. But 40% of all building related problems are due to water intrusion, right?
Wow.
70% of all litigation as a result. So when you think about value engineering the roof, consider it's an important component, right?
Right.
And then really in terms of sustainability, so equal or greater in terms of value engineering. But look, all that being said, in terms of sustainability in the future, it is all about reducing those carbon emissions. And we're going to just continue to see more municipalities and cities pass ordinances, and people are going to want to keep up, and so these documentations are going to become. There's still manufacturers out there that really aren't paying attention to this. Perhaps not on the roof, but others. And
yeah.
So look, it is here to stay. This is here to stay. That it's over, right? It is all about now. How can we best respond to do the right thing and position our companies to win in this new environment?
Yeah, I love it. I think that just says it all. So for everyone out there, get with your manufacturers, ask about this, check out those Soprema products and what they've got going. All of this is the future, and it's not going to go away. So getting in front of it really will make a huge difference for you and your company. Jeff, thank you so much for being on the show today. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. It's just really great information. Thank you.
Nice job. Okay.
I want to thank all of you for being here today. Of course, you can find all this information on riverscoffeeshop.com, the Soprema directory. Please go there, visit, check it out. They have so much great information, excellent articles, and we've had previous RLW webinars on sustainability and environment. So you can find a lot of information out there, plus some on hail, performance, durability, you name it, they're all out there. So please check those out. And please join us next on September 22nd, when we have our next RLW, and we will have Sika Liquid Applied Products, who will be here to talk about roof restoration. So it kind of follows just perfect right after this RLW. And we're going to go right into that roof restoration and how we can extend the life of the roof. Thank you all for being here today. If you have any questions, please reach out to us at Roofers Coffee Shop or email us. You can email me, Heidi@riverscoffeeshop.com. And of course, this will be on demand within 24 hours, where you'll be able to share it, and please share it out to all of your friends and other roofing professionals so they can learn all the great stuff that we learned today. So one last time, Jeff, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank all of you. Have a great day, and we'll see you on September 22nd for the next RLW.